the sun and its planets. More and bigger planets equals more non-hydrogen material, which equals more non-hydrogen matter in the sun. Mr. Gonzalez, for your mediocrity, you failed to obtain tenure. For your support of the rare earth hypothesis, essentially consisting of nothing but made-up numbers that say life is impossible, I'm afraid you fail at science. You, however, are not expelled. You've done some interesting work on the habitable zone and galactic habitable zone. This will give us a starting point on where to look if looking for alien life. If you can stop letting foundational bias get in your way, you might be a good scientist one day. I'm just going to cut out the part about scientists not being willing to show their face. It's an appeal to authority and majority, and may even be a lie. In any case, a scientist isn't a scientist unless he's willing to risk all and put his hypothesis to the test. He fails the very definition of science if he doesn't.
But maybe intelligent design should be suppressed.
I'm going to take a little side trip here. This quote was taken from the movie Expelled.
But maybe intelligent design should be suppressed.
Obviously, it doesn't reflect Stein's feelings on the issue. Taken out of context, it puts words in his mouth. That would be quote mining, and is a dishonest thing to do. Anyway, carry on, Stein.
Intelligent design is a set of excuses to squeeze creationism into the classrooms.
Get intelligent design in the schools today, and we can have school prayers tomorrow.
Any other complaint?
The funny thing is, I'm not sure whether Stein's response here is one of joy that teachers would be making their students pray, or mocking the idea that ID could lead to prayer in schools. For the former, I'd like you to meet the U.S. Constitution. Government employees aren't allowed to encourage or forbid religion. That's what makes religion free here. As for the latter possibility that the idea of ID leading to prayer in schools is ridiculous, please familiarize yourself with this, the Wedge document. Let's have a look at this. The very first line, the proposition that human beings are created in the image of God, is one of the bedrock principles upon which the Western civilization was built. Funny. I would have thought it was all men are equal and deserve equal freedoms. You know, like freedom of religion, that thing which says that the idea that man was created in God's image is no better than the idea that man was not created in God's image. They then go on to attribute various lovely things that arose in our culture to this religious notion, in response to which I'd like to point out that Emily Dickinson wasn't very religious at all, yet she turned out some wonderful poems. Even if our society did enjoy greater freedoms and achievements than others, correlation is not causation. Joseph Stalin and Adolf Hitler both had mustaches. That doesn't mean that all men with mustaches will become sociopathic dictators given the opportunity. Next, the document goes on to attack science and its role in society. Now, later on, Myers pointed out that this document only goes after materialistic science. See, here's the thing. The scientific method requires that a theory be observable and testable. Essentially, if it can't be tangibly demonstrated in a repeatable fashion, it's not science. Science is materialistic. Only things in the material world can be tangible and testable, so really there is no dichotomy between science and this materialism. What this is an attempt to equivocate materialism, which is to say naturalistic science, with materialism, which is to say the act of being shallow or greedy concerned with material goods and wealth. In other words, referring to science as materialism is kinda like pronouncing evolution as evolution. Although the term isn't necessarily incorrect, it's used to attach bad feelings to a word. Anyway, as for science, and I've just shown how the phrase materialism really means science in this context, being bad for society, science has brought nothing but improvement. Before Freud, there really was no psychology. There was insane people, retarded people, bad people, and normal people. Thanks to science, we now know that some of the insane people suffer from schizophrenia, and in some cases we can even treat them with medicine, help them get back on their feet. We now know many of the people once thought to be retarded are autistic. Making the proper services available, they too can become functional members of the society. Thanks to science, we know that serial killers typically come from an abusive home. With preventative measures against child abuse and increases in infrastructure, serial killers have become less proliferant. Thanks to psychological profiling, the few killers who do arise are caught faster and faster. Ironically, although the document condemns materialistic approach to crime, crime has, in fact, decreased per capita by a lot, thanks to modern methods of criminal justice and psychology. Like a weed, crime must be eliminated at the root. The cause must be attacked. If Myers had his way, we'd just throw the criminal away. Cut a weed at the stem, the weed dies, but a new one soon replaces it. Destroy the root, eliminate the cause, and it's gone for good. If child beatings produce rapists, the first concern isn't to kill the rapists, it's to stop the beatings. Fewer beatings, fewer rapists. Myers next goes on to attack utopianism. Firstly, I'd like to point out that any naturalist can observe the imperfections in society and realize that a perfect utopia is impossible. That said, it does give us something to work towards. Socialized education, social security, free libraries, all of these things come from noticing discrepancies between our society and the utopia and fixing them. If we don't have a goal, we have stagnation. The Dark Ages was one such stagnant mire of a theocracy. Meyer next says that the DI will reopen the case for a broadly theistic case for nature. Did he really mean to say that this wasn't about a god or gods? If so, might I inquire what definition of theistic was it that he intended on using? Next, we have an itemized list of goals. The governing goal: to replace materialistic or scientific explanations with the theistic understanding that nature and human beings are created by God. This isn't about academic freedom. This isn't about equal time. According to their goal, they want evolution gone and creationism taught. They said it themselves. They're trying to replace the materialist explanation of evolution with the theistic understanding that God created everything. That, of course, doesn't mean that they'll do it all right away. This is a wedge. They have to start small. For example, as a 5-year goal, they want intelligent design taught as an alternative theory to evolution. Although that sounds like it's fair, they won't stop there. Give a mouse a cookie, and in 20 years, the goal is to see ID as the dominant theory, as in eliminating evolution from the curriculum. This document also goes into in-depth detail of each stage of the wedge, and we can actually see things that have been done with it. In Phase 1, we have the book Darwin on Trial, The Thin Edge of the Wedge. I've read it, but I think I'll save it for another documentary. This one's already going to be long. They also plan to do scientific publications. They've listed a few studies on the Cambrian explosion, and likely the paper published by Mr. Sternberg was a part of this phase. How's this for a coincidence? The very same Stephen C. Myers who wrote the article published by Sternberg was the director of the Wedge Project. We can see where they began Phase 2. Icons of evolution, of pandas and people, the proposed curriculums. We'll get to that later. The movie Expelled fits quite neatly into this phase, the phase of publicity. The cultural confrontation, Phase 3, is just happening now. I'll bring this up again later. Just remember, when you hear the phrase academic freedom, remember the 20-year goals, the ones where evolution gets kicked out on the basis of not being